Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. For those tuning in on the simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on X, we're glad you all can be with us. Going to bring in our friends over on IG to bring them into the conversation. We're also going to bring in our radio side here at Max WYED 94.1 FM here in Mississippi and WYEDonline.com. And lastly, we're going to bring in our friends over on Amazon Live. Have a great guest that's joining us today. Had a chance to read his book. That's a great way to kick off this year. That not only helps us to better understand our health, but also our role that we play in our health as well. And we're now live on the Amazon side with Cyrus Ware Presents. Going to type you guys in a welcome message over there. If you guys are new to us, make sure you guys do hit that follow button, either here in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our next guest. Excited to welcome Dr. Kevin Hoffarth to our broadcast today. His new book is called The Disease of Belief. You guys can see it there, both in print as well as a Kindle edition. I want to talk to Kevin not only about the writing of the book, but what it's been like for him to help people better understand their role in their health. One of the things that he talks about in the book that I'm definitely excited to talk to him about here in this conversation it is the fact that we are able to play a role not only in the things that we feel, but also how we respond to them as well. If you guys are just now finding out about the book, we'll let you know how to stay connected with Kevin too. But Kevin, thank you again for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and welcome from Houston, Texas.
We're glad to have you with us. You know, Kevin, I love this book, and I'm so excited that I had a chance to read it before this conversation because I think it helps a lot of people, even by the title, The Disease of Belief, to really think about not only the way that they interact with life, but also how the way their body interacts with them and how they play a role together. What has that been like for you to be able to share with your patients and also with others through your book?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Just not to I always like to remind my patients and anyone I'm working with or future working with is I like to see disease like a book. So when you go to the doctor's office, we tend to start, not to pick the one with my picture on it, sorry, but we tend to pick the last chapter. Okay, so someone comes in, they're complaining of something. They come see me or another physician or provider, and we start in the last chapters. And then we go to the very last chapter. We give you a diagnosis, and we give you a little treatment, and we say goodbye. And oftentimes, I don't know if it's what been your experience, but for a lot of people, it sort of feels incomplete. Now, if you think about the book, my very first book I wrote was called Functional Medicine: The New Standard. It's talking about the middle pages of the book. So allopathic traditional medicine tells you what you have. Functional medicine is just another paradigm of thinking, which tells you how you got there. And then this book, it starts to talk about the early pages of the book. So now if you start reading a book from the beginning, you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And in this first book, in this next book, I should say, in The Disease of Belief, we're basically talking about the first chapters, the why. Why does the body choosing to go down this path in the first place? And that's the part where epigenetics starts to play a vital role, which people don't realize that epigenetics is above the gene, and it's influencing how our body, our physiology, the direction it'll choose. But the very first thing, if you start to reverse engineer someone's process of getting disease, it seems like it might start up here.
Yeah. And as you were talking then, Kevin, I thought about two of the examples, and we can come back to them, that you have in the book, both of Jack and Jean, both who seemingly seemed like they were living life, quote unquote, correctly or in a healthy way, but also were dealing with things. I want to go back to what you said, though, about the beginning of the book, because I found out a term and that's one of the reasons why I love Kevin, not only having conversations like this, but reading books like this, because I learn things for myself that then I can share with our audience. I had never heard the term biological decoding before. You also have some great you also have some great acronyms in the book, like the CAB too, that I'd never heard of before. But let's talk about the biological decoding, because that is a big part of the through line of this book. Talk to us about how you were able to discover that yourself and the role it's played not only in what you do in medicine, but also in living your life.
So thank you for bringing that up, because biological decoding, I'm kind of introducing a pretty new concept to the United States. Now,
Okay.
biological decoding, if you first look it up, I'll be the first one to say it's gotten a lot of criticism going back to the 1970s.
Mm,
And the reason is I don't think we were there yet in science, okay? But now in the 21st century, with our understanding of, and a lot of things I bring up, and please, I hope the readers stick with me here, is, when we're bringing up concepts like quantum physics and trauma medicine
mhm,
and the emotional side of care and epigenetics and these things that kind of get thrown out and talk about it. And this is why I put it puzzle pieces, because
mhm,
this is a bunch of puzzle pieces that have been pulling together with science over time. Biological decoding is like functional medicine. So, in understanding the how we got there in the physical world, functional medicine is not a new medicine. It's a way of thinking and help people put it into a little bit more easy thought patterns and a paradigm shift. Well, biological decoding takes the concept of mind body medicine that I always have thought, it makes sense. I think a lot of people sort of intuitively appreciate it, but it
mhm,
felt incomplete using that word mind body medicine. And biological decoding is a way to see how the emotional story that we carry, both consciously and unconsciously, can play a role in this book that I call disease.
yeah.
So that's what biological decoding is. Exciting. I was introduced by it about 5 years ago. Just like when I first learned about functional medicine, I was like, whoa, I didn't know anything about this. I
Mhm,
was a fish out of water like anyone. And yet, intuitively, when you kind of hear something intuitively and you're like, gosh, that makes total sense. I was drawn to it. And yeah,
yeah.
look, just with any discernment, I really wrestled with how it looks over 5 years and started practicing it a little bit with my own patients, like the ones I mentioned. And
Mhm,
I think, one thing that I bring up in the book, and I thank you for bringing it up, is I bring in stories of people who are what most people would call in the top 1+% of physical health, yet
mhm,
still got disease.
yeah.
And that tells me that we are missing some chapters in
Yeah.
how we're looking at disease.
And I'd like to go back to that, Kevin, because again, I found those as someone who's very interested in people.
Mhm.
I love the approach that you took with the individuals, like I mentioned, Jack and Jean. And one of the things you did that I think all of us, no matter what our profession could do, is you were actively listening to them. You knew the questions to ask, and then you were actively listening to them, what they were telling you and what they were not. And one of the things I thought was so fascinating about that was that it to go to what you said earlier, that a lot of times when they come to you, they're at the end part of the book, right? But you were able to take them back, especially with Jean. I'll take that example because it's fresh in my mind
Yeah.
of asking her, when did you not experience what you're experiencing? And her being able to share that and you being able to help her see the connection there. What was it like for you to see how it's one thing for you to learn it yourself, Kevin, but what was it like for you to see it in practice with patients like Jean and with Jack?
Well, I can tell you in the first half of my career, one of the reasons why I moved into functional medicine in the first place, I've been doing this for 25 plus years now,
Mhm,
is I felt like I didn't have a lot of wins, Cyrus. I feel
mm,
like I was just prescribing a lot of medications, but I wasn't really changing anything. I didn't really feel like we were moving the needle a whole lot. We were just kind of staying stagnant. And that's when functional medicine became introduced to me. But then you get to a point where in the physical realm, I feel like I got a little stagnant again, where it just
mm,
wasn't pushing the needle to push like these patients who are, gosh, doing everything right, yet still like there were cases where people like Jean who still developed, say in her case, cancer. Like,
mhm,
and so you're like, whoa, wait a minute here. Okay, how did that happen? And so you need to start looking outside the box. And it's not about being fringe, it's about really pushing the boundaries of me as a physician and listening to their story. And
Yeah.
it was so profound when she like kind of made that connection that you were bringing up, that I bring up, where she's like, oh my gosh, the connection that was occurring before even the diagnosis. And that's the kind of point of biological decoding is you
Yeah.
could start to see that their emotional struggle, and this is not just like any thought like, oh, I think I'm going to get this. It's like people who are really struggling and really taking that emotion deeply within them, they're creating sort of that epigenetic push. And in her case, she started to see it that, wow, this started 9 months before I was even diagnosed.
Yeah, I love that. And you get very personal in this book too, Kevin. I had never talked to you before, but I feel like I know you at least on some levels because of what you shared. I want to get more into that. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, welcome. You're watching Cyrus Represents here on Amazon Live, but we are simulcasting this across social media and for our radio audience here in Mississippi at Max WYED 94.1 FM and WYEDonline.com. We're excited to welcome Dr. Kevin Hoffarth to our broadcast today. He's the author of this book. You guys can see The Disease of Belief. That's a book that I read. You all can get it in print as well as a Kindle edition as well. We'll also let you guys know how to stay connected with Dr. Kevin too. You talked about your own family in this book, Kevin, in a very personable way, your own conflicts with belief as well. What was that like for you to become a subject of the book yourself and to dive into your relationship with your father and what he was dealing with himself when it came to illness?
Yeah, well, my dad was a physician, and he was a surgeon, and my mom was a nurse. I don't know if I brought that up in that. I think I brought that up in my first book.
Mm.
And so I grew up around medicine, and they had a very 1980s, I would say 1990s approach to care of when they were really practicing it deeply. More like my dad. My mom quit nursing early in her career, but I just it always felt a little distant, um, and not like my dad. Great surgeon. He was an ear, nose, and throat. I mean, if you wanted a great surgeon, that's who you go to. There was always sort of a disconnect, though, like that kind of personal side to understanding someone's story. That
Mhm.
you don't get that, and definitely you don't get that generally with surgeons. There's exceptions to that rule, but it just never like connected with me, and that's why I think I was drawn to the medical side, not the surgical side and I like to sort of see how the puzzle pieces come together. And with my experience, I can connect. I learned, and I share this as in one of my chapters, that I kept that distance between patient and physician for a long time, and it wasn't until I bridged where I, in the appropriate situation, shared my own story with a patient, that we have this patient. We'll call it the patient-doctor relationship, but it's not just the patient; it's the doctor
Yeah.
too, and you have to share. And when you make that union, then people are going to be more willing to share their story authentically as well. And so that's what I really try to do. Thank you for sharing. Like I'm glad it resonated with you, because it's hard to share these things on some
Mhm.
level, and you don't know how people are going to take it.
Yeah.
But it was my story, um,
Yeah.
and and that's the point. Is it's not about judging someone's story. It's about me as their guide, physician guide, to just see, okay, how is their perceptions of their story affecting them
Yeah.
emotionally?
Yeah.
Because one story may not, like, you could get the same story in two different people. This is why I find twin studies very fascinating. When you look at twin studies, genetically identical, but one dies early from, say, a disease and the other one doesn't. Well, okay, what was the difference there? And that's where their experiences, their perceptions of, even including their thoughts and emotions, do play into it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the latter part of the title of the book for a second here, Kevin. The book is the title is The Disease of Belief. In talking about your father, you also go into belief as well and faith. And again, that's why I felt after reading this book, so I have to let our audience know. I was joking with Kevin before we went live. I was checking with him about the pronunciation of his name because I had watched some of the interview that you've done, and one of them was with one of your patients, your clients, and they were talking about when they first found out about you about the wait list. After reading the book, I understand why you have a wait list because
Yeah.
it's very obvious to me that you're not just there trying to treat people, you're there helping them to feel the connection and also the healing that can come from better understanding the connection between their health and their circumstances. And I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about in the book, Kevin, about your father and belief, the idea of belief and faith, and how you were able to reconcile that and find your own path. Do believe, looking at it from the outside, that is part of the connection people feel, like you reference about that doctor patient relationship? Do you feel like that is one of the reasons why people do resonate with you so much?
Well, first of all, thank you. That it's very heartwarming to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, I guess so. I guess I don't give it much thought. I just try to be my role is. I, I guess the difference that I saw in the old way of sort of being a physician, my dad's world, it was sort of a paternalistic approach. I take more approach that I'm just part of the team.
Mm.
And as I bring in my first book, I remind every patient they are the CEO of themselves. They are literally just hiring me as a consultant. Okay. And so
Yeah.
I'm just a guide, I'm just a support. I'm not, they have to, choose what they decide to do, and be a part of that. Otherwise, it's like, if I just tell you what to do and you don't know why you're doing it, and,
Yeah.
most people will just kind of fall off. And I realize that real change occurs when the person truly has skin in their own game.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's where the connection, I think that's why I am successful. And, I always joke that I don't do a whole lot of advertising because my patients are my billboard. They're walking
Yeah.
billboards.
Right.
And but, honestly, I didn't get that the first half of my career. I mean, yes, they liked me, but I don't think I was really moving their needle,
Hmm.
because I was working with under just a single lens of thought, which was the
Right.
allopathic traditional medicine, which is
Right.
fine. It helps, it's great for surgery, it's great for acute care, it's great for ER, but chronic care, which is 95% of disease in the US, is, I don't know, I think we do a pretty pathetic job, frankly.
Yeah. And that is where I think that difference lies then, Kevin, because again, I've after doing this show for many years, and it has not been my own personal experience when it comes to my healthcare physicians or my parents, but you hear people talk about, how cold, the profession can seem. I don't hear anyone saying that about you. I don't hear anyone saying that your approach is that way, that they feel like another number. You actually do, as you're sharing with some of your patients of the book, you really do take a personable approach. And I think that is one thing that people kind of gravitate to. If you don't mind, I'd like to go back to Jack for a second, because I think about Jack, and I think our audience will appreciate this too. Because when you write about Jack in the book, you're talking about this rash, right?
Mhm.
That he's supposed to have. But you're very. I love the fact that you're able to share that when he's talking to you about it, it's not the rash that's there, it's the itching, and helping them understanding where that all comes from. What was that like for you to reflect on as you were writing the book? How you've been able to help people look beyond the symptoms to really what is the cause of what they're dealing with?
Yeah, Jack is, and I can say this because I'm a guy. Okay, so like guys, like working with women versus working with men are two different worlds, and I think
Mhm.
women are a little bit more open to hearing some suggestions when it comes to maybe the emotional side to things. Where Jack was a perfect example of a guy who, he was just seeing it as like, okay, I got this rash. He kept calling it a rash, and
Mhm.
by the time he reached out to me, like mid months passed, he had gone to Cleveland Clinic. He has some wealth, so he was just traveling everywhere trying to figure out this. And I asked him, I'm like, why didn't you come to me? And he's like, oh, I
Mhm.
just thought you weren't a dermatologist, so you couldn't handle this. And I was like, oh, okay, well, uh, but whatever. And the bottom line is, it's like as I was talking to him, and initially I talked to everyone through the portal. They're writing to me, and because I like to have it documented so I can think about it and just give them the necessary time they need. And I'm like, I'm like, is there a rash or is this just an itch? And so I decided to call him because I was like, I'm not convinced there's a rash here. So I had him describe it, and he goes, well, there is no rash. And I was like, oh, you've been using the word rash this whole time.
Right.
And he was just itchy all over. And I was like, okay, well, no wonder none of the treatments worked. He went to like literally the top places, what we'd call the top places in the world, like Cleveland Clinic, and Mayo. He went to those, and they were just giving him creams and meds, and nothing happened. And I was like, okay, we're missing something. And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try the biological decoding approach to this, that lens, and asked him, okay, so what was going on right before that? And that's when his story just was like, whoa.
Yeah.
As I share it, it's like, wow, this is, and with people who haven't read the book, like he was scratching himself all over the place. And yet he had made some decisions in his life that he couldn't, he emotionally, like, as I brought up in that story, to make it quick, it's like during COVID, his girlfriend moved from one state to another without really a conversation. She kind of just moved into his house. And, when you kind of got down to the root of it, he couldn't stand the itchiness of of like this decision she had made
Yeah.
without him really involved in it. She just started kind of moving gradually all her stuff, and you start to realize there was an emotional component to this physical.
Right. It really was fascinating. And I think the reason why I brought that up, I want to make sure I got that in, Kevin, is because I think people, if they look at themselves and look at some of the things they're experiencing, that'll help them to better understand where it could be coming from, and kind of see the connection to like individuals like in your book as well. For those who are just finding out about the disease of belief, and we've just kind of really scratched the surface of some of what you've touched on here, Kevin, what do you hope the book does for them personally?
Well, I do. I hope that this drops a little seed where people, instead of, let's say they get a diagnosis or a loved one gets a diagnosis of something maybe not great, I mean, cancer or something, rather than just simply going, okay, who am I going to go see? What medication I'm going to take? What steps I'm going to take? Maybe just stop for a little bit internally and ask, what was going on in my life emotionally in the 6 to 12 months that led up to this? And just take a deep reflection. A lot of people find this very uncomfortable. Okay. This is where I say guys and girls are a little different.
Yeah.
Women are a little bit more comfortable going there, where guys be like, like Jack was a perfect example. When I asked him, oh, what were you doing in the last 6 months? Oh, everything's fine, and just kind of blowing it up. And I'm like, no, really, let's really dive in. That's when I really started to understand his story. And so I think that's if there's one thing you get out of the understanding of biological coding, is at least start with that question, or at least don't ignore that question as well. The others is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting you don't do other things and you don't take a functional medicine approach, a traditional approach in various ways, but it's about integrating all of them together.
Right.
Because we're not managing disease, we're trying to reverse engineer it. That's like
Yeah.
the heart of what I'm trying to figure out in this career, is like, what is truly leading us to this directionally.
It's a great book. I really enjoyed it, Kevin. I'm so glad to have you on to talk about it again, everyone. Dr. Kevin Hoffarth has been our guest. The book is The Disease of Belief. You can get it here on Amazon, both in print as well as the Kindle edition. So some of you guys have already gotten the Kindle edition. So you'll definitely enjoy the book. It is very personal. It is not written like you would think a doctor would write. It is very personable, very easy to be able to take in, and really gives you a lot to reflect on. Kevin, really appreciate you stopping by. Let our audience know, how can they stay connected with you?
So there's a couple ways, but just to bring out, it actually hasn't dropped yet on Amazon, but will be also audio book.
Cool. Okay.
And there is a few other sites that it's on audio. So if you kind of Google it, you'll find it. And I do my own read. I don't like when authors don't do their own reads. So, but I would actually say go to my website, biofitmedicine.com, and just because that's where you can actually attach to my newsletter. I write weekly. I really try to talk about health from a, kind of like you were bringing up, a very try to different typical doctor approach.
Right.
And this is not about like being woo woo. Okay. This is about pulling in the different puzzle pieces that so many people have been talking about in different directions and try to weave them together into a story that makes sense. And
Right.
that's where I think each lens, traditional medicine, functional medicine, and now biological decoding, share a piece to understanding that.
All right. Well, Kevin, definitely appreciate this time today and looking forward to have you back on the program again.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the kind words, Cyrus. I appreciate you.
It's my pleasure. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.